this this presentation, so we will have it archived for future viewing. We will have it posted on our YouTube webpage. So with that, please welcome Sherrie.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me come speak with all of you. The work that you do is fascinating. I'm going to be talking about different public data sets that you might need to access if you're writing grants or anything along those lines. Where do you find the data? How do you tell the difference between the data? Because there's a lot of different poverty measures and such that you need to address, as well as, what are the different resources out there to help you access all of this data. So as we go through the presentation, the first part of it is just going to be PowerPoint slides. Basically going to be telling stories about how the data has evolved and so on and so forth, some of the background to make more sense out of it. But then we'll do a hands-on demonstration. So if you have any questions or comments along the way, please let me know, either through the chat or make sure you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question at that time. Otherwise, I know questions kind of wane over time, so it's best to ask it right when you have it. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about what the State Data Center program actually is. This is a partnership with the U.S. Census Bureau. So this really only applies to census data, although everybody that is in the State Data Center network throughout the country and our territories are also involved in their various state agency data sets, as well as other resources that are proprietary. So basically, we have your back. If you ever have questions on data, at the bottom, I have the link directly to the page that has the information on who you can contact. But if you just remember to Google State Data Center Program and make sure that you look for the one that's on the Census Bureau website. And it gives you the option of whatever state data you want. So all the states are listed. Click on whichever state and it'll give you contacts. And believe it or not, we actually answer the phone and we actually answer people's questions. So it is a volunteer network. The Census Bureau doesn't pay us to do this kind of work, but it's necessary in order to make sure that the data is being utilized by all of our agencies within the state of Illinois too. So right now I'm the interim liaison for the State Data Center. And we have one other contact that manages all of the Chicago Metro data. And he's with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency on Planning. And so the two of us basically field all the calls and the emails. And I also assist with some mapping information, which we're going to cover in this presentation. So here's the agenda and the different public data sources that I plan to kind of go through with the hands-on after we're done with the PowerPoint. Census Bureau is very confusing. I'd be curious to see a show of hands of how many people have accessed the Census Bureau website and if your experience was positive.
I kind of love it.
Yeah, pretty user-friendly.
Have you accessed it recently?
Yeah.
I used it last week. That's the most recent.
Aha. Okay, well, I'm going to go through the history of the Census Bureau and why there are so many different data sets with different geographies inside of them, and how to tell the difference and figure out which data set you actually should be accessing. Because if you've never been there, it can be a little intimidating trying to figure out how to navigate it. So they used to have what's called Fact Finder, and Fact Finder is now gone. It was not because the Census Bureau wanted to get rid of it, but it was due to something with IBM, where IBM wanted to raise the costs, and the Census Bureau didn't want to pay that amount of money. And so anyway, they kind of went off on their own and created this data.census.gov. So this is the new data portal. There are still issues with it. I'm still finding glitches here and there. So there's still things that they need to work out. but most of the data is available there. And I say most only because there's some data sets that they have yet to incorporate, so we're waiting. IPUM's data is a fantastic data set. It's probably my favorite out there. So I'm going to go through that one a little bit more detail in a little bit. The on the map commuter data, that you might say, well, why are we even concerned about commuter data? Commuter data is great when you're looking at your daytime population versus your nighttime population, because people travel from one place to another place for their work. Well, who are those people that are coming in, you know, that are working within your territory? So that's a great application for that, and it is extremely user-friendly. The education data, State Board of Education, workforce data is at the Department of Employment Security. I'm going to talk a little bit about Google Earth and how you can make that useful for yourself at your job. It is great beyond just looking up your address. There's some really interesting things that you can do with that on your desktop. Community Commons, hopefully some folks have heard of that before. They've been changing their website quite a bit. I haven't been on there just recently, but it looks like they're adding more stories and more resources, which is really interesting. And then the Census Bureau just added, so this is something new to the slides, is the state stories. Based on the 2020 census, the Census Bureau is publishing basically like state profiles of that information. So you can get some more up-to-date information. Are there any other data sources or, you know, something on your wish list that you'd like to see that's not on this list? I was just checking the chat box. Okay, then I'll keep going. Sometimes it's hard to know what to ask for when you don't know what is out there. So I will also address, I didn't add it to the state stories here, but there's also what's called quick facts on the Census Bureau site, and I provide the link for that within the slides here too. And so if you're just looking for high level general information on population, race, ethnicity, things of that nature, usually quick facts can get it for you, and it's very quick and easy to access.
Sherrie, this is Jody. We had an interest in the Justice Department.
Aha, okay. Well, in what context? For immigration, or what were you looking for?
This is Ron Melka. Part of it's juvenile justice, part of it's mental health court, substance use disorder court, just the amount of mental health issues with incarcerated people. So, you know, any information from the Illinois Department of Justice, there used to be a data website where you could get a lot on say, substance use disorder arrests, drug arrests, juvenile arrests, various categories regarding that. You know, if you want to treat, you know, shootings and gun violence as a public health issue, that data would be helpful.
Okay, I don't have that off the top of my head for this presentation, but I can certainly look into it and then add it to the PowerPoint slides that we'll send out again. Because I sent out a preliminary PowerPoint presentation, and since then I've added a bunch more resources to it. Because I know some of that is covered in the Community Commons information, but that's more of the residential population health overall. It doesn't have arrest information in there. I'm already familiar with the Illinois State Police data, but that doesn't really get into mental health issues either. So let me check on that and get back to you, Ron.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
Looks like we have a couple other state agency collected data, Department of Human Services and Public Health.
Aha, okay. The Department of Public Health has a whole ton of information. And when Ron was bringing up about, you know, different mental health and substance abuse and stuff like that, I know the Department of Public Health has some great data on that, as well as the CDC. There's the Wonder database, which has some great stuff in there. Illinois Department of Homeland Security, I'm assuming that is. I'm not familiar with their data.
Human Services, I believe.
Oh, okay. I think that's IDHS, Health and Human Services. But I'm not, I've worked with them, but I'm not familiar with their data. So I would have to check on that. What was the context that you were thinking?
Could I add, I didn't pose the question, but it is Illinois Department of Human Services. I'm sure that's what Sharon's looking for. And they fund mental health services, substance use disorder services, and DD services. It's different divisions for each of them, and the division of rehab is under them. So they do have a really big website, but they only publish certain data. So it's very hard to find things about the rate methodologies for specific areas. It's hard to find county breakdown of data, but I believe that's what Sharon's talking about.
Okay, all right, that's a little different. Yeah, let me see what I can find. Sharon, I'm writing your name down.
Yeah, this is Ron again. I just sent out in the chat the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, their research overview. And I used that years ago, but I hadn't used it recently, so I couldn't quite remember the name. But I found it.
Well, what's funny is the data seems to change with some of these agencies, and as you're going to see in this presentation, some of them have just updated their website, so it's difficult to find where the data is located. Okay, Lynn, I see your comment too. Okay, I'll write that down. And then one of the challenges is always trying to figure out their methodology, so I'm glad you mentioned that. All right, so I don't know what I'll be able to do about those in particular, because those are not areas that I delve into on a regular basis. But if we have some time, we'll certainly go back to it and see if we can go through and figure out where their data is located. But as far as the methodology, that'll be a little tough for me to do quickly. So we'll see how time goes. So my mouse is not working properly here to move the slides. So if I'm bouncing around a little bit, I apologize. We're not going to talk about Census Bureau first. I'm going to go to my question first here. So raise your hand if you believe Illinois has been losing a lot of residents since 2010. I don't know if I can see hands on this. Let's see. I see Colleen.
Yep.
Okay, so most don't think we've been losing population, or at least a lot of population. Well, the news has certainly been hammering Illinois for the last, well, since 2013, because the other surveys that the Census Bureau does actually started showing that Illinois was losing a lot of population. And without having anything else to check, that's what we had to go by. So this kind of gives you a comparison between all of these different data sets that we have to go off of. The very top one is showing the decennial census from 2020. And if we compare that to what we had in 2010, we only lost 18,000 people, which is nothing when you're considering we have almost 13 million in this state. So it's 0.14%, which is basically noise. But if you look at all these others, we've got population estimates, which I'm going to discuss a little bit further and show you how to access this information online. But population estimate program is from the Census Bureau as well. All of these actually are from the Census Bureau. And they use the birth and death rates from each of the county, and then they add in how the migration patterns of those who move into the state or county versus those who move out, and as well as those from other countries, you know, whether you move to a foreign country or move in from a foreign country. So they put all that together based upon the 2010 census, and they add or subtract every year. So that way you can look at population estimates for every single year between the decennial census. But as you look here, 170,000 people were lost. Okay, now we're talking a bit much bigger number. And remember, we were gaining population until 2013. So if you only look at the loss from 2013 to 2019, it's a lot bigger. And that's usually what we've been seeing in the press, are these numbers. If you look at the American Community Survey, the next one down, loss of 171,000, which pretty much agrees with the population estimate. But then you go to the 5-year American Community Survey, which is basically an average over the course of 5 years. You get a gain of 25,000 in population. And then if you look at the apportionment numbers, which just came out with the Census 2020, we got a 41,000 loss. Now the apportionment is what is used in order to determine the redistricting, basically. And it includes folks who live in the United States but are stationed outside. So that would be like the military, for example, would be included in those numbers, which is why it's a little bit higher than the 2020 decennial census figure. But how do you reconcile this? Because every single one of these numbers can be cited in a report, and they're all correct. We're trying to figure that out ourselves, actually. And there's going to be a lot of challenges with the 2020 census, because once the information came out, which was just last week, there's been an awful lot of discussion of various communities that are ready to challenge their counts. It seems like Aurora is the one that's in the news all over the place because they're really upset about being an island amongst population gains, and they're an island of population loss, and a pretty significant one at that. I think it's about 8%. So the Census Bureau has come out and said that they're very confident in the reliability of their numbers, but everybody is kind of wondering just how good that reliability is because of COVID interrupting their operations when they had the folks on the streets trying to collect the data. So there's going to be a lot of challenges and a lot of discussions moving forward. And when you look at these kinds of numbers, it's really hard to try to reconcile that information. At the bottom, I do have a link to the census apportionment results, and then the link that goes directly to what I have on the next slide, which is this: how to figure out what data set is right for you. We talked about the 2010 and the 2020 decennial. You know, these are actual counts, so they're universal. And so those are the most reliable data that we have anywhere in the country, and is used as the baseline for so many other data sets. The population estimates program, that's the one that's based on births and deaths and migration patterns. A little bit different reference date, so you need to be aware of that if you're going to be comparing a year of population estimates with a year from, you know, another survey. You have to be aware that the dates might be a little bit different. So the American Community Survey is probably the most popular out of all the surveys that are on the Census Bureau website. But there's two different surveys that are put together. There's a one-year estimate, which is great because then you can do a great trending. You've got data for every year, but it's only for those geographies. I talk about geographies a lot. Sorry, I'm a geographer too. but it has to be a geography over 65,000 in population. So it could be a township, a county, a city, it doesn't matter what the geography is, has to be over 65,000 in population. So if you go into the 1-year estimate and you realize, whoops, you know, the city of DeKalb is not in there, well, that's because they don't have 65,000 in population. So then you got to go to the 5-year estimate, which is basically, they're surveying every single day. And what they do is they average that information basically over that 5-year period. So when we had that population change, as I mentioned in 2013, it took a while for the American Community Survey 5-year to pick up on that change. And actually it hasn't yet, because if you look at the 5-year American Community Survey here, it's still showing that there's a gain in population. And that's partially why, because it takes a while for that 5-year to catch up on those small nuances that change or tipping points. So you need to be aware of that when you're looking at the data. So any question on this one? The American Community Survey is probably the biggest one you need to be aware of. Okay. So I have on here for the 5-year every geography, kind of. And the reason I say that, and I'm going to show some of this in the hands-on demonstration, but you could have a population of 1,000 for a town, and you can have a margin of error that's maybe 500. So that means that your estimate for that particular town is 500 to 1,500, not very specific. And you can have other communities where you're actually having a range of negatives, which means that the data is no good. So for small geographies, you're going to get some really weird results when you start to consider the margin of error, because the likelihood of the census talking to somebody in a small town is not very good. So all of that is generally estimated, and sometimes it's just not reliable. So you have to be careful. I'll take a look at the chat box real quick. Yeah, Jane, I agree with you. Yeah, it's not necessarily fake news because they're using the right numbers. But once the 2020 census came out, it kind of challenged everybody to, you know, take a step back and take a look at this information again, because are we losing population in droves or are we not? And that's what all of these challenges and lawsuits are really going to bring to bear. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So I'll talk a second about geographies. The problem with the Census Bureau are these are the only geographies that you can get off of their website. If you are covering a territory that perhaps is kind of a custom region, you can't just go to the Census Bureau website and download your data. It does not exist. So if you see anything missing here that would be of benefit to you if you were able to go there and download it beyond what's listed here.
School districts would be helpful.
You know what school districts are, but they're not, I didn't list them here. You caught me.
Oh, sorry.
They should be on the list. Okay, I'll give you one. It's college districts. And that's one, they need data all the time. And college districts do not exist at the Census Bureau. So we have to use proxies for those all the time, which sometimes makes it difficult. But Illinois is also the king throughout the country of having special districts. I mean, by far. We've got 6,918 from the last government census, and the next highest is Texas with only 5,300. So yeah, we're king in making lots and lots of extra governments. And if you ever look at your tax bill, you'll see the long list of all the tax districts that we pay into. And so anyway, that kind of complicates things because a lot of these districts are not the same as a city or a county. You know, they encompass more things than just that. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. So if you ever have a question on how to access data specifically for your geography, because you cover, you know, a custom area, not a straight county or straight city, you know, give me a call and we can figure out some proxies for you and how you can access data. I'm not going to read all of this to you. It's mostly for reference. But I will say for the decennial census, it's the most reliable data that we have throughout the country that is comparable, you know, from one geography to another. There's been a lot of changes to the decennial census over time. The questions have changed and the information that's been collected has now changed as well. But I will say that the privacy down here, I should have put this as number one. Privacy is of the utmost importance for the decennial census. And so towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk about additional measures that they're having to take now in order to protect everybody's privacy. So they do not share the information with anybody outside of the Census Bureau. So the biggest thing for the decennial census, and what we've been hearing a lot in the news lately, because this is all new, is how many seats does each state get in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. So what they do every 10 years, they wipe the slate completely clean, and they start all over with allocating. And right now we have 435 seats in the House, and they allocate it proportionally based upon the population counts in each of those states. So Illinois actually did very well. We still lost 1 seat, but we were on the fence for losing 2. So I have to give kudos to everybody that worked on getting out the count for the 2020, because we accomplished the goal that we needed. There was no way to recover the 1 seat that we were going to lose, so that was a given. But losing the 2nd seat would have been devastating, and that's really what we were trying to do. And woohoo, we did it. Everybody gets a clap. So that was a big deal. So we're down to 17 seats. And you can see how Illinois gained in population all the way through, you know, to 1930, and then that's when all the westward expansion really started to hit. And so us losing seats really doesn't have anything to do with losing population, because we actually gained population during that time frame, but has more to do with how much population growth there was towards the west. And this kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. This is for the seats in the House of Representatives. Oh, I take this back. This is the House, the State House, not Congress. They had to redraw everything. So Chris Welch, as the Speaker of the House, was in charge of the redistricting. And I'm not going to go into how this works or anything along those lines, because it's very political. But this map on the right, the proposed, actually was just signed into law by the governor. So it's no longer proposed. That is the set districting. So if you compare what's current to the one map on the right, you can see there are some major changes. And so we're waiting to see how they wound up redrawing the congressional districts. And I think that's at the federal level, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. I haven't seen those maps come out yet. But on Chris Welch's site, you can definitely get the map for both the Senate and the House for Illinois. It's going to be an interesting election year, that's for sure. So a little bit of history about the Census Bureau. It used to be that before the 2010 census, so we're going back over 10 years ago, almost 20 years ago, everybody received what's called the short form, which is shown on the left, which is the real basic information. And then about 1 in 6 households on the right would get the very detailed booklet of questions. And this got very detailed about how is your mental health in the last 30 days, things of that nature. And after the 2000 census, a lot of folks went to their legislators and told them how they didn't appreciate answering all these very personal questions. So the legislature came back to the Census Bureau and said, okay, you can no longer ask the long form questions, only the short form. Well, you know, that would have been fine, except the long form questions are the questions that we all need information on. And I highlighted in red what's the most common information that folks download. This is very important information for everybody to understand about their communities. So the Census Bureau came back and said, well, how about if we do an American Community Survey? So that's where that came in. It actually started in 2004. And, you know, I was talking about the 1 and 5 year. There was actually a 3-year data set in there for a while, but the budget cuts got rid of the 3-year. But it took several years after 2004 to get a full data set. So you don't see a 5-year until a little bit later. But that's where these came from. And it contains all the short form and all the long form questions. But you have to understand, this is just a sample survey. So it's not as reliable as the census. I mean, when we got the 2000 census, holy cow, that was a treasure trove of information, because that was actual, you know, data counts for everybody. Now we have the sample data, which is nice because it gives us information basically every year if your population is over 65,000. However, you know, it's tough to use if you're looking at very small geographies. So it really just depends on how you need to use it as to how effective it will be. Here's an example of what you'll see in the 1-year data. These are the cities that have over 65,000 in population. That's it. So like I said, if you're looking for DeKalb, you're not going to find it in the 1 year. And I get a lot of phone calls to that nature of people looking for a specific city in the 1 year because they want to do annual trending and they can't find the city in the data. And this is why you have to be aware of the population. So you will not be laughed at if you call and ask that question. That's okay, because we get it all the time. And we got to make sure that, you know, everybody's in there. Now I have to point out, you see Skokie actually only has like 63,000 in population, but it is included in the 1 year data. And I think what happened is they used to have more than 65,000, but then over time it was reduced, but the Census Bureau has not removed them out of the 1 year data set. So all of a sudden Skokie is going to disappear from this data set. So if you're not able to use the 1 year, well, then you're kind of stuck with the 5 year. And this is when it gets interesting and when most people who don't really like working with data just kind of glaze over and shut down the computer. So hopefully some of my rules of thumb here will help you. Don't shy away from this. It's just to help you figure out what the reliability of the data actually is. So I have a list here of very small communities. You see Annapolis CDP. It's not even a municipality. What that is called is a census designated place, which means somebody submitted to the Census Bureau that they needed to aggregate data for that location for some reason. And usually it's more like recreational areas where you have a whole ton of mobile trailers or something along those lines, and people are only there seasonally. But they want to collect information on that. So they'll dub it a CDP in order to include it in the data set, but they're not incorporated areas. It's just concentrations of population. So if we look here, I have the 2019 ACS estimate of what their population is. And then the MOE stands for margin of error, and exactly what that is, because when you do a sample survey, there's always error. So what I do is I take the 2019 ACS, divide it by the margin of error to determine what the percentage of margin of error is, and that's really high. So if I calculate the range, which would be 22 plus or minus the margin of error, gives you -13 to 57. Now you can't have -13 population. That makes no sense, which means that number is not reliable. And so on the left here, I have kind of a rule of thumb. So the green up to about 20% is okay. 20 to 40% use caution. Don't use it if you don't absolutely have to, but sometimes we don't have a choice. If that's the only data you have, then that's what you have to work with. 40% and over are unreliable. Now, I'm not saying not to publish the information, but definitely include the margin of error and just acknowledge that, you know, the margin of error is really high, but this is all we can access. So as long as you're upfront and honest about it, which I've seen in a lot of reports, then it's fine. Any questions on that? Because that's probably the worst concept in the 5-year data. Once you get over this margin of error thing, it's okay. Oh, went all the way to the end. I think my slides, sorry, I'm going to bounce around a little bit. I lost a few of my slides, but that's okay. We'll talk about Epsilon next. Remember when I said that there's going to be some changes with the census data. I am not going to go through all the details on what an Epsilon actually is, but what wound up happening, I'll tell you the story behind this so you can understand what it is. The Census Bureau was approached by a couple of folks that said, do you know that if we take your data that you publish on your website, we can run some algorithms and we can recreate the original data set. Now, the most important principle for the Census Bureau to follow is to maintain everybody's privacy. Well, if they can recreate the original data set and identify who lives in what household, that's not protecting privacy. So the Census Bureau hired a whole bunch of statisticians. And if you go to their website today and look at their jobs, it's almost all statisticians. So they're still working on this. But what they had to do was change their methodologies. They used to use very set statistical techniques of introducing noise. They would swap data, they would smooth data, all kinds of different techniques, and it's not enough. Everybody's desktop has so much computing power that people were able to write these new algorithms and actually recreate the set. So they brought in what's called differential privacy, and that's been around for a long time. The only new thing about it is that it's never been used on such massive data sets such as the Census Bureau. And they've only been working on this for about 3 years now, so this is relatively new to them too. And so they have now determined how to apply this differential privacy. And there was a lot of opportunities for people to play with the 2010 data and look at what the data was that was published, and then look at the data of how it would be with Epsilon applied. Now, Epsilon is a measurement between 0 and 1. Did I just lose the screen share?
It looks like, hold on, let me make sure what's going on. Nope, it says it's still, there we go.
Okay, I just reshared. Okay, so Epsilon is a measurement between 0 and 1, and have I show here, it's between privacy and accuracy. So if you have a measurement of 0, that means that it is more accurate than it shows or maintains your privacy, and vice versa. They were going to be publishing this Epsilon, kind of like the margin of error in the American Community Survey, and they have not. And I'm not quite sure what the state is of this, but just in case you hear of Epsilon, that's what it is. And you won't be alone, because everybody is trying to figure out exactly how this works. Because if you want to add 2 county populations together, but one has a 0 for Epsilon, one has a 1 for Epsilon, we're not sure what that means if you add those 2 together. So anyway, that's stuff that we're working on. And they said to use a Sudoku puzzle as an analogy. So if you think of that, when you work the patterns, you can start filling in different cells in that Sudoku puzzle. Well, that's kind of how they were recreating this website or data cells. Sorry about that. And so that's what they're trying to combat at this point. So there's going to be more information on Epsilon, and they said once this is published properly with the 2020 census, it's going to then be filtering into all the rest of the Census Bureau surveys, and then to other federal agencies, and then I'm assuming it will then migrate into state agency data. So it's going to be around, but I think it's going to be a few years before they really get this rolled out completely. And just in case you like math, here's the actual calculus that you use in order to put that together. But I'm not going to go through that with you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there, see if there are any questions at this point on what I've covered so far. Okay, so I was hoping to go to 150. We made it to 146. So we'll be back on at 156. So we'll take a little 10-minute break. And if you have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat box or on live. Started because there's a lot to unpack on all these different things. I'm going to start with the census. And so when you go to the link of data.census.gov, you don't need this census yet. You come to this home page. Now, the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and explore the census data. And I'm going to go right into advanced search. And the reason I'm doing that is because it doesn't limit you then. You want to go ahead and have access to absolutely everything that they have. So I always go to advanced search. You can either get to it box here or underneath they have advanced search as well. So either way, we'll get you to this interface. Now, the Census Bureau, when they do training, they always tell you topic first. I'm going to tell you, no, go by geography first. It's not because I'm a geographer. It's because when you go with topic first, it will eliminate a lot of geographies right off the bat. So if you're looking for city data, for example, if you go ahead and put in a topic, it could eliminate a bunch of cities right off the bat, depending upon which survey or census you're looking at. So I always go to geography first, and then that opens up everything that is available to you by that geography.
Hey, Sherrie, this is Jody. We're having, Sherrie.
And Jody, what's your territory that you cover?
Sherrie, we're having a hard time. Your voice is breaking up on the mic.
Okay, is this better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. Should I restate what I just said, or did everybody hear enough?
Yeah, probably.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll keep moving on. Jody, what kind of geography do you cover?
I'm in Springfield. I don't do any needs assessments at all. So you might want to, I'll defer to somebody who does.
Well, again, we're probably going to look at county data. And for me, again, probably sometimes looking at municipalities or cities, looking at different populations within that jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Aha.
Our membership typically is county or township with a few municipalities.
Okay. So counties are pretty straightforward. That's county. But they got kind of creative on the rest of it. Townships are considered county subdivisions. And then cities or I should say municipalities or CDPs are considered places. So as long as you understand, which grouping you're looking for, it works out pretty well. Now, I mentioned before they have not populated this with everything that's out there. It seems like there's a lot of geographies in here. However, what they don't have, if you're working in a county and perhaps a city and the city goes across the county boundary into a different county, you used to be able to go in here and grab part of the city that is in only this county. That kind of information has not been populated yet, but it should be within the next year. So if you have kind of odd situations like that, the information is available. It's just they haven't populated it yet. So you can give me a call and I can help you with that. So let's take a county as an example. So somebody name a county that you work with.
Madison.
Madison County. Okay. So we'll go into Illinois. You can download all counties within the state, but we're just going to go to Madison. Now down here is your selected filters that come up. So anything that you select is going to show up down here. So if I go in and grab different years, different surveys, so on and so forth, everything will be down here. So they made it pretty easy. If you want to change what's here, you just click the X and it's gone again. So I'm going to get Madison back in there. And then we'll go into people and we'll do some race and ethnicity information. So now that I checkbox that, that goes down below. Now you see some of these don't have a checkbox. You can still select it, but it means that there's additional layers of selections beyond that. Okay, so it doesn't mean that there isn't anything there. You just have to keep going with it. So I'm going to go ahead and do the search. And this is where it gets kind of wonky and what the Census Bureau needs to work on. They have these table IDs, but as you can see, there's no rhyme or reason to how these are showing up in order. I know if you're looking for like total population, like this one here, this is not the routine total population table that we would access, although you'd still get total population data out of this particular table. But it's just confusing to try to figure out exactly how it's going to show up. And I know total population, you got to scroll through an awful lot of tables just to find the right one. And it should be up at the top, but it doesn't. For some reason, they have to figure out how to get that to work a little bit better. So if you come in here and you're having trouble exactly defining which table you need, you know, we can help you with that too, because we have a list of all the tables from the most general down to the most detailed. And so usually using that, then you can go back into, I'm going to back up a minute, into this advanced search table ID and just pop the table ID right in there. So when you're working with census data and it's something that you're going to have to go back to again, make sure you write down the table ID. I've started to put it in all the source citations at the bottom of any visualizations and stuff like that, only because there are so many different tables in here, it's really difficult to find them again, especially if you're using percentage for some and others, you want to use numbers. There's tables for both, so it gets a little difficult to try to find them. So write down your table numbers. So go back into the Madison County. And up here, they always give you just some general information. Obviously, Madison has over 65,000 in population because here they're giving you the link to the 1-year estimate data source, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and go into, let's see, we were looking at race. I'll go in here. Now, there's different ways of looking at race, too. And, you know, this is some of the nuances of the data itself. This lists what the races are, and the Census Bureau has broadened the categories substantially with the 2020. This is looking at the 2010 categories, but for 2020, now we can add up to 6 races, which are the 6 main races, and then there's other and so on and so forth. So the 2020, you know, breaks it down even further, which is tough when you're trying to compare from one census to another. But Hispanic is not a race. Hispanic is an ethnicity, which is completely separate. So you can be a white Hispanic, a black Hispanic, you know, so on and so forth. And so if you want to break out, you know, white non-Hispanic with white Hispanic and so on and so forth, that's a different table because you'll see this one is only race. So this is a great example where you have to keep going through and scroll through all these tables before you get to the table that has race. There's another race table, probably percentages. So, still not there yet. Oh, I keep loading. No, I didn't want that one, but that's all right. Hispanic or Latino origin by race. Now we have it broken down between Hispanic or non-Hispanic by race. So this is why it can get confusing when you come in here, because all of these different tables contain a lot of different kinds of information. So if you ever get confused, give me a call. We can help you with that, or somebody else on the network list. So once you find the table that you want, now you want to download this entire table. So they got a nice download button up here, which is great. Now now you have to figure out what you want to download. And unfortunately, if you went all the way back up here, now you see download selected 0. We have to get a checkbox in the table that you want. So we've got to make sure, and hopefully it's still highlighted all the way down here. Checkbox that. But this is a problem because you can't click on download. You have to scroll all the way back up, then click on download. Now you get the option. And the nice thing is, what we didn't get in Fact Finder is here you can at least select as many data years as you want, which is great. And this is now defaulting to the 5-year total population. So if Madison County would have a 1-year data set. So let's move it over to the 1 year. So this is where you select the different data sets, is up at the top, okay? But actually, this is only to view the data. We have already downloaded the data. I'm gonna go back in here. And here it gives you the 1 or the 5. If we had selected a geography that did not have over 65,000 in population, this 1 year would either be grayed out or would not appear. All you would have the option for is the 5-year. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of those and download. They all come in as a zip file. So you need to have something that, some kind of program that's able to extract it. And these are all the files that you get. We only downloaded 2, but you get 3 files for every download. And the one you want to use is this data with overlays, because otherwise, you know, these are not going to give you everything that you need. The data with overlays includes both the table ID number for each variable. Gotta move this. Come on, I'll just expand it. I got all the Zoom handles all over the place. I can't access the controls. But anyway, across the top are all the variable IDs, and then below that, at least you get the text, okay, which is what makes sense. So I always just get rid of these. And I will let you know that if you're doing a comparison of 1 year with another year, you can't just do like lookups in the tables, because the Census Bureau likes to change these text headers as well as the variable headers that I just deleted. They are notorious for inserting, say, these are numbers, say they wanted to insert percentages here for whatever reason, I don't know. They will restart all this numbering from number 1 all the way over, instead of leaving everything consistent from 1 year to the next and just giving this a higher number at the end. They don't. So you got to be real careful when you're using these different data sets to make sure that they're actually comparable from 1 year to the next. Don't assume. They will also change these text headers to where this year it says total, next year it is totals. But we've run across that too. So unfortunately, it's more of a manual process to do that. So, but anyway, that gives you an idea of how to download the data. Any questions so far? I see we've got some things in the chat. Okay. Okay. Something else I will say, I downloaded both the 1 year and the 5 year. But if you look at the title of these individual downloads. You can see it's the ACS data type 1 year for 2019. So as long, and the table ID. So if you leave this name the same thing, you can always reference back and see what table number it is and what year and what kind of data it was, 1 year or 5 year. Has anybody gone to the census site trying to access something and kind of got off track? We'd like to see where it's at. Okay, I haven't heard anything, so I'm going to keep moving on. The other thing that I had mentioned before is the Census Quick Facts. This is great if you are writing a grant and just need quick information. When you come to this page directly, which is linked in the PowerPoint slides, it automatically defaults giving you the national information, which is great for comparison purposes. Usually we want to add Illinois. So I'm just going to type that in and add it in, and it'll actually put it right next to, eventually. Do I have to select the fact now? I don't want to select the fact. Okay, well, usually this works real easy. That's interesting. Okay, that's okay. So you have to make sure you capitalize Illinois. Oh, for Pete's sake. A lot of this stuff has just changed in the last year, so that's another thing I'll percolate up. But anyway, it compares whatever geographies that you select with the United States for you. So then you can go ahead and export a table of this information. Makes it real easy in that regard. They have been expanding their mapping capabilities online, which is really good if you want to just insert a map into a PowerPoint or something along those lines and don't have a GIS system in order to do that. So this, this one in particular just compares the population in Illinois with the surrounding states. But if you wanted to get into poverty or something like that, you could definitely input different townships, county subdivisions, or places for municipalities, and get that information exported as a map, which is really handy. Any questions on that? This dashboard is new. This is something that I have not used. Okay, so it kind of puts all the information together for you, which is nice. And this more button for sharing on the Census Bureau, if you have a website, they have the snippets of code that you can grab. You can add the state of Illinois or the county of DuPage, whatever it is that you want, and post that code on your website. And so you can have these interactive dashboards and stuff appear on your site itself. So folks don't have to go to the census site, which is sometimes really nice. Okay, no questions on that. I'm going to get into IPUMs. And this one might require some notes, but I've also included additional resources at the end of my PowerPoint. So when Jody sends out the newer version, after the 10-minute break slide, there's a whole bunch of other slides on all of these different resources that I'm going through with you now. And those resources in particular, especially with IPUMs, there's a lot of instructions that go along with how to use this. But I'm going to go through it and show you how it works and what to watch out for if you run into something strange, because it happens all the time. IPUMS stands for the Integrated Public Use Microdata System. And so but now they really don't use that. They just go by IPUMS. And as you can see, they have all kinds of different data sets on their homepage that you can access. The most popular is IPUMS USA. That is all the same census data that you access on the census website. So what happened was the University of Minnesota came up with this great algorithm to be able to publish data that is not available on the census site. So the example I always use is you can go to the census site, you can download how many Koreans there are, and you can download how many people are on food stamps. But you cannot find out how many Koreans are on food stamps. That kind of cross-tabbing is not available if the Census Bureau didn't already create a table exactly for that topic. That's what this site does. This fills in all those blanks. So if there's something missing on the census site, then you need to go to IPUMS in order to use their data. This is the actual data at the household level. So to give you a little bit more complicated example, I worked with the Chicago Tribune because they wanted to do, basically replicate a Pew study on mixed race marriages across the country, but the Tribune wanted to focus on Chicago. There is no place on the census site where you can just download mixed race marriages. It doesn't exist. However, they do have the information because if you remember what's on the long form and on the short form, they do ask all the questions in order to get at that. They just don't put it together for you easily. So IPUMS, you're able to go in there and you're actually able to go back to the household level. So you're connecting spouses back together along with their demographic information. And then we did a quick comparison to see if their races differed. And if they did, then we put those into a new data set and we were able to aggregate it and we were able to actually show where most of those couples were living throughout Chicago. Now, the downside of IPUMS, every 10 years they redraw what's called a PUMA. And a PUMA, not a gym shoe, it is actually stands for public, public use microdata area. And these PUMA regions every 10 years are redrawn based upon counties that are 100,000 in population or more. So if you have a county that is less than 100,000, then they're going to group that county with another county in order to get over that 100,000 threshold. So I have included a map of what that looks like in Illinois. We are in the process of redoing that now. So some of that is going to change now with the 2020 census data. But that won't be published till probably 2022. So we got a little bit of time yet before the new ones come out. The IPUM site is great for a resource for other sources as well. Like we've got the current population survey, also another Census Bureau survey. And this is where unemployment calculations and stuff of that nature come from. But the lowest it will go in geography is state level. So, but there's a lot of great information in there too. So you can see there's a wide variety. Here's even health surveys that pulls together all kinds of information into one site. Luckily, almost all of these use the same kind of interface. So I'm going to go through the interface on IPUMS USA, which will arm you with the skill to be able to access basically any of this information in here. This NHGIS is kind of different from everything else. I think that's why they put it in the center. This uses GIS data. So if you were going to use another program, you could actually go in here and download GIS data along with the demographic data already added to it, which kind of saves some time and effort. And there are some great open source GIS programs out there. So we have to use them ourselves. So that kind of helps shortcut a lot of stuff. But I'm going to go into IPUMS USA. This single website could be a 2-day workshop just in and of itself. So we're going to do this very quickly. When you come in here, you have to create an account and everything is free, no charges for anything, but they want to have your information because once you submit a data extract request, they will send you an email and let you know when that data is ready. If you're creating a huge data set, it could take up to 2 days before you get notification it's ready. But usually, you know, what I run, I usually get it back within a few minutes. So it's not that bad. They also maintain all of your data runs. And I'll show you how that works because that is a phenomenal feature. You can go back in and you can edit that single data run without having to redo everything, which is really nice. So you have to answer a whole bunch of questions when you create your account. And then you actually have to promise that you will use it for good and never for evil, which I really love about that. Their team there, they're fantastic. And if you ever get hung up and you call them, they will actually answer the phone and they are very knowledgeable. They will help you right away. I had to use their assistance in doing the Chicago Tribune article too, and they are fantastic with that. So here you'll see all kinds of resources down the left-hand side. And down here at the bottom, they have this IPUMS bibliography. This in particular is very important because they have to justify to the Census Bureau their continued funding and support. And they do it through this bibliography. So if you use some of their data and it's just one visualization in your report, that's fine. But put it into this bibliography too, so they can tell the Census Bureau, hey, look at all these great things people are using it for. We need to keep this going. They also have at the bottom how to cite their information, which is really helpful because I know a lot of other sources, you can go ahead and get their data, but they don't give you the exact citation that they prefer. So this is the one that I use all the time for IPUMS USA. They also have some great tutorials on here. There's a user form in case you got questions and you don't want to call the university. You can pose your question in the user form. And then they also have a lot of Census Bureau information. So here are supplemental data. You can see the geographies and GIS. It's basically maps of where these pumas actually are, where their boundaries are. So a lot of really good information there. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to select data, which if I were at the home page, is this big blue box right here. It eventually comes up. All right, this is the page. This page is the entire interface, which doesn't look like much, but boy, can you do a lot of stuff from this point. The first thing we need to do, I don't do select samples first. I always go to household, geographic. Every time you select data, you have to go to household, geographic. That is the first step. So now you can see all kinds of stuff pops up. This is where you're going to identify what your geographies actually are. So if we're looking at Illinois only data as an example, we need to select something about the state because otherwise the default is the entire country. And in here, you really want to minimize your data set. I mean, usually on the Census Bureau, I just want it all. Just download the whole dang thing. Here, the data sets get really big, really fast. So, you know, here, less is more kind of thing. So we're going to filter for the state. If you're not sure, now this is a bad example because we all know what states are, but if you're not sure what the variable is, you can click on it and it gives you all the metadata about that particular variable. Now, I'm not going to go through it on states because that's kind of pointless, but gives you an idea. I mean, these are all FIPS codes. Not all of the information in here uses FIPS. So it's always good to kind of take a look at the metadata just to make sure of what it is that you're looking at. I'm going to go back to this screen and select our state FIP. And usually, if I were looking at a county in the Chicago metropolitan region, they have a lot of folks living there. So the county is going to be well over 100,000. Say they're 300,000, in which case there would be 3 pumas within that one county. And we always want as much detail as we can get. So I would always select puma, only because then you can select the 3 pumas for whatever county you're interested in. And you can then, you know, split that data and kind of describe more of what's going on in the 3 different regions of that particular county. But you can see there's a lot of other options in here. You can work with all the rest of these, but you need to keep in mind, this is not for the data itself. This is for filtering, and that's like the big key for this. You're filtering down to the data that you want. So if you select like metropolitan area, which is fine, but it's still going to be by Puma. Okay, it's just going to have an extra column that's going to define if it has a metropolitan area assigned to that particular Puma, which really isn't that much help, honestly. Really, it's state. You can do county, but county is only going to be effective if the county is its own Puma. So I'm not real sure when you would use any of the rest of these. So I usually stick with state Puma. So that is the first thing that I go after. Now you can see this type over here is they're all H's. The type will either be a P or an H. P stands for population, H stands for household. Any census information that comes in, the first branch that data does is population and households. The two are kind of kept separate. So this is all household type. The reason they put this here is because it has to do with weighting. And don't worry, it's real easy to do in here. But you have to be aware of your P's and your H's so you know what weight to apply. The codes, extremely helpful on all variables. And I already went in here and kind of showed you the FIPS codes in here. But when you're going into race, for example, white's probably 1, black's probably 2, Asian's probably 3. So in your column, you're only going to have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you want to cross-reference those to what they actually represent, then you need to have the codes. So that links directly to the codes for you to take a look at. But they also let you download them, you know, when you get all this information anyway. So it's all good. You won't lose it. I'm going to recheck the state and Puma. And then beyond that, you can see across the top, they have all of these listed. So you got to make sure if I were to select county, the NHGIS code for whatever reason, there's no data for that. And it will actually flag you for an error for that particular variable, because if you're selecting the 2019 American Community Survey, there's nothing to be had there. So you want to make sure that the data that you're trying to download is actually exists. And then this is just a continuation over to the right. So does anybody have any idea of something that you'd be curious to see in here? Because everything that you can get on the census site is available here too, for the most part.
It's starting to be a little overwhelming.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
This is a really fun data set, believe me. So once you see me go through it the first time, it'll make sense to you. And it won't take much for you to be able to repeat it. It's just 6 months down the road, you're not going to remember exactly how to do this. So that's why I put it all in the PowerPoint slides.
Good.
If you scroll down to disability, what will it show you?
There you go. So, yeah, it's all the same stuff that the Census Bureau collects. Now, for 2019, all you've got is starting with the VA service down to hearing difficulties. But we can click on this and see what the codes are. Okay, so just if they have a hearing difficulty or not. Not a lot of detail on that one. See.
Some of those categories are, I'm a little
Offensive.
scared.
They're offensive. I mean,
I think,
I don't know who wrote those, but they
yeah.
surely weren't
I thought I
in
was
our
saying
field.
this incorrectly. Wow.
Dane,
Are they from
It-
1850?
for real?
Idiotic.
Wow.
For real?
Wow.
Someone needs to reach out to them about that, let me tell you.
Wow.
That's horrible.
Is this the 2020 census or the 1920 census?
Yeah, really.
Well, this is the American Community Survey. So if you're looking at like deaf and dumb, they are not collecting that data, but it is available going back to 1910 and earlier.
Oh, I see.
Okay, all right.
Still in there for the
Wow.
old data because that's all that's
Yeah.
available.
That
Okay.
makes more
Yeah.
sense.
That is horrific, though.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, oh,
Well, look how far we've come.
Yeah, that's what yeah, exactly.
well, we used to ask questions about how many slaves you owned.
Oh,
So, you know, if you go back to some of these real early censuses, I mean, it's
my
wow.
gosh.
sure, yeah.
really different.
Is that under
But
race
then-
then maybe?
Pardon?
I said, I'm wondering if that's under race or when you look in that area, if they have that termed that way.
No, it's
Yep.
probably under a household treated as animals
Oh,
because it's ownership.
To-
really? My gosh.
Like how many cows do you own?
Oh,
Well, they actually used to count as residents, but only 50%.
Right, for congressional districts and other reasons. Okay.
But yeah, things have come quite a long way. That's why they have a lot of these eyes for further information.
mhm.
I'm sure they had a lot of fun, you know, trying to get this stuff set up so that we could get back to the original household level. I have not worked with any of this early data. I don't even want to go near it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
A lot of their stuff is just really bizarre. So yeah, father's tribe, mother's tribe. I mean, we don't talk like that anymore. So, but they wanted the information to be available to everybody. So if you want to do a lot of historical searching, I mean, you'd have to start off first with the actual census and how those questions were asked in order to understand the data that you get back on some of these.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Oh, did we select? Yeah, we got two variables. We didn't select anything here. So I'll just go ahead and select race and Hispanic origin, just for kicks and giggles. And now we can go into selecting samples. And I don't know why I do this backwards. It doesn't really matter. But in here, you can see it goes all the way back to 1850. So, I mean, you can really go back and get all that information. You cannot get that information on the census site. They only go back, I think, to 2000. So anything earlier than that, it's a little bit more complicated to access. So I usually steer people to IPUMS in order to get that information. These two, well, as you can see, the USA full count, it only goes to 1940 and Puerto Rico. So usually you want to stay on this USA samples, and I usually just uncheck it and then recheck what it is that I want. Now you'll see this is just ACS. So this is ACS 1 year, because the 1 year is for populations over 65,000, and these Pumas are all over 100,000. So the good thing here is you can just use 1 year data, which is great. So that's what I always default to. But you know, if you're really slicing and dicing this data really deep, where you're doing, you know, only kids from 0 through 18 and, you know, all these other variables that you want to add in there, the more you add in, the more error you introduce, and the data is going to start looking strange. This is about the only way I could describe it, because I've had it happen a couple of times. Like, this doesn't add up, you know, that the totals at the bottom are getting weird and stuff like that. So that's when you need to expand your data. So that's when I would go to a 5 year, but typically the 1 year is just fine. Now, when I said there used to be a 3 year data set, well, you can see it here. They published it for quite a few years before their budget dried up on that one. So that's why they have the 3 year here and then 5 years over here. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of where that is. These information, they says it doesn't include persons in group quarters. Group quarters is a situation that you live in where you have a common kitchen area. So that would be like college dorms, which were severely impacted in the 2020 census because all the students were sent home before they got the counts on those campuses. That was fun. But it also includes like military barracks, nursing homes, hospitals for long-term stay, prisons, things of that nature. all of those folks would all be in group quarters. The group quarters folks are all included in the total population, but you can also break them out and take a look at just people in nursing homes and so on and so forth. So that's why they wanted to make sure that you understood that this does not include group quarters. So the population count overall is going to be lower on these data sets. So we're just going to go with the 2019 1 year. And I'm going to go ahead and submit. Okay, Courtney, I'll get back to your question in a minute because we'll go look at health insurance next. So this goes ahead and we're back to our house. Okay, we're back to where we're selecting our race and ethnicity. So I'm going to go ahead and view the cart. You can see we've selected 6 variables already and 1 data set sample. So if you view your cart, which is a 3 cart, they'll give you the year and then they add all this other stuff in there. Now we selected state, Puma, race, Hispanic, well, in year kind of, but we didn't select any of this other stuff. This they automatically supply for you, which is good. So the sample is just an identifier, not important. I usually click all this stuff off so I don't get it in the data, but if you leave it in there, that's fine. It's just extra columns in Excel and you can delete them in Excel, so it doesn't really matter. Household serial number doesn't count for anything unless you are connecting people within the same household, like I did for the Chicago Tribune. That's where that comes into play. But we're not doing that here. We just want a total aggregation. So here's the Census Bureau serial number, not important. The variables that we're really looking at is race and Hispanic origin. Those are P's for population. So we don't need household weight. We need person weight, which is this one here for the P's. So the rest of their stuff can all be turned off. So person number and sample unit, it doesn't matter, but how that works when you fill out the short form for the census. The first person filling out the form is identified as number 1, which is usually the head of household. And then the spouse would be number 2. And then you go in birth order for the kids from there. So that's what that would identify. Whether or not they're in group quarters, I'm not looking at that right now. We're just looking at overall. And then their statistical information. So I usually turn that stuff off. But we need the rest of these. So I'm going to go ahead and submit my data extract. Okay, the first thing I said, make sure you get your geography selected for your state and your Puma. Here's the second big one that a lot of folks miss, and I don't blame you because it's easy to just kind of go right by. If you wanted to change any of your sample data, here's where you can go back to your sample page and change this if you wanted. Here's where you show the variables that we have selected. So if you want to change any of those, you can, because they got a change button right here. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these. But the most important thing that you do have to do is this data format. This is the default as being a .dat format. Most programs on our computers cannot open a .dat format. So we have to go in and change this and select CSV. Leave everything else as it is and then submit. So that will change this to the CSV format. Otherwise, you could get errors that your computer doesn't recognize what it is you're trying to do. So everything else is okay. You don't need to change anything here. I have played with this reducing the extract size, but really all it's going to do is tell you, okay, if you only want a state, select that state. So I told you that, like the state and the Puma, those are filters, okay? So in order to activate that filter, we need to go into the select cases. That's where you get your filtering done. Because right now we're still asking for national data, and that's way too much. So what filters do we want? We want to go select Illinois only, for example, and we can leave the rest of it for now, but say we only wanted to look at Asians in Illinois. Well, you could go in and you can select race, submit. We'll pick Illinois, and here's where you can pick all the different Asian categories. okay, which I'll go ahead and leave it at that. So we're going to get 4, 5, and 6 in that column only. I'll submit. And this kind of gives you an overview of where you're at and what you've selected. It takes a little bit of time. I know it was mentioned about how overwhelming this can be. Yeah, it can be. So, you know, plan on doing several different data runs until you become comfortable with the data that you're looking at. So I'm just going to put test. I'll just leave it at that. Submit my extract. Now it's going to ask me to log in so it knows who I am because I haven't logged in yet. No, I don't want to do this again, but this gives you an idea of all the questions that they're going to ask. And they actually zeroed out all of my information because I changed my email address. Well, this gives you an idea of what you're going to have to fill in. Oh, come on, go away. Let me fill this in. Sorry. Oh, come on. I'm not even really sure what to fill in here. Because it's only specific. Okay, come on. Okay, sorry about that. So now I will resubmit. So if you go in here and you submit and it doesn't recognize you, that's when it's going to come up and say, okay, you need to go ahead and register and fill out all the information. So right now it shows that it's actually processing this data set and it's actually going to come back pretty quick. If you stay on this page though, it won't automatically change when your data is available. You have to click on the refresh button up here in order to see if it's ready or not. They give you all the information on your data variable. So if you click on the basic, here's a description of all of the data variables that we have selected, which is really handy. So I'll get down to this is all the race information right here. Here's the general race information, but then they always have a second one with a D at the end, which is more detailed version. And holy cow, can you get detailed? Right? There's things in here I've never even heard of before. But if there's anybody in that area that you're looking at in any of these categories, they will show up. So it depends on how detailed you want to get. And the same thing with Hispanic. I mean, here's the general, which is actually more detailed than what you typically get. But then they have the really detailed version showing where people are from. To get back out of here, this DDI kind of explains the metadata for each of the variables there, in case you were curious about getting more information on it. Not so much for race and ethnicity, but some of the categories that you get into, it's always good to take a look at this information to make sure that you understand exactly what it is that you're using. And I also said that when you make a data run, you can revise your extract. So if you click on this revise, it brings you right back to this screen. So if you forgot to change the data format from .bat to CSV, They say, oops, and so you can come right back in here, make that change and resubmit it. And it will automatically retitle it to revision of, and whatever name you gave that particular data run, which is really handy. And what I didn't mention were these additional selections here. Now, data quality flags, if you're slicing and dicing this data an awful lot, where you're getting by PUMA, you're getting income, you're getting age brackets, whether they're married or not, whether they have foster children. Okay, these are very small populations. So you might want to include data quality flags. That's another way to make sure that your data is reliable. Attaching characteristics, this is how you attach, spouses to check their race, stuff of that nature. And then trying to customize your sample sizes, which I've never used. I've always just taken all of the data that they have available and aggregate it back up to the population numbers. So up here now. I have data page up here, but they don't. I just clicked on account to get back to this My Data link. The My Data link, oh, see, it's already ready. Brings you back to this page so you can see all your downloads that you've had so far. Now, the third step for using iPhone's data that you have to do, you cannot just click on that and download the information because it won't open for you, of course. This is something we've been asking them to do for years. Please fix this so we can just click on it and download it, like it says. You have to do a right click, save link as, save it somewhere on your computer. Then we're going to go open it in the file, show in folder. And now you can see what it is. It's the first data run under this email address. It's a CSV file, which is good, but then they add this GZ at the end. Your computer won't know what to do with that GZ. You have to right click and you have to specifically open it. The 7-zip works the best. Most of the machines come with a default zip, I think it's just zip program. That doesn't seem to recognize the GZ extension. So you have to save it on your computer. 7-zip is free. There is a paid version too, but I just used the free version and it works just fine. So I just did a right click, show in folder, and then extracted it here. So here's my extracted version. It gets very frustrating if you don't have that. So here you can see the coded data that you can download. The PUMA, I'm going to go ahead and sort this by PUMA. So you can see there's a lot of sample within, let's see, that's all one PUMA right there. And then the person weight is how many people this individual record actually represents. So there's 83 people that are of race 6, which I think is Japanese, because we only downloaded 4, 5, and 6. So you can see this is all coded that way. So you have to cross-reference back as to what 6 is so that you can fill that in. And then the race detail is going to be all the Asian details of race information. And same with Hispanic. There's not a lot of Hispanic Asians. I'm sure there's some in here. Let's see. Yep, so there's some, not a lot though. Out of this whole data set, there's only 67 of them. 67 records, but it represents additional people, as you can see in the person right here. But anyway, that's how that is structured. Anybody have any questions on that so far? That was a pretty fast run through.
Sherrie, we've got a couple of comments that the data isn't showing for a couple.
Okay.
You don't see it.
That's right. I have to keep switching the screens, don't I?
Yeah, good here.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So if you were doing multi-years, it'll give you that information. State Illinois is number 17 in the FIPS codes, so it's all Illinois data. So here's all the Pumas, so you can sort that. And then how many people are represented within each one of these records. I'm going to go back over to okay, so let me get back to sharing this. I think Zoom is the only one that does this, where instead of just showing the desktop, it only shows certain screens. Okay, so I should be back to the iPhones USA data extract. Okay, now there was a question in here about the health insurance data. Let me get back to that. Under the person drop down, there are duplicate variable categories with the second ending in 2. It's probably the difference between years and what the question was that was asked, but let's go and take a look. Person and their health insurance. Okay, is this the one you're talking about? So I'm not quite sure why they did it that way when they have original, but there is no data for that. So I'm not really sure. You can't select these two on any of these topics. So I'm not really sure what the point is of why they even included them on the page. But this is where you would go for health insurance coverage. And that's obviously a new question because they only asked it in 2019. They have pretty detailed information in there. Courtney, did that answer your question?
Looks like it did. She responded yes.
Okay. All right, you guys are answering your own question. Okay. All right, any other questions on iPhones? Say another thing, I know you work on mental health. Another category that is becoming really popular amongst a lot of researchers is trying to identify those that are like 16 through 24 years of age and whether or not they are engaged in work or school. Because if they're not, then what are they doing? And so that's been kind of a challenge in the Census Bureau data. They collect that information, but they don't present it. And so we have to use the IPUMS data in order to gain access to estimate how many people are in that category. So that's always interesting. And then you can break it down from there into, are they making any kind of income off of, maybe they inherited a bunch of money or something. They don't need to work or go to school. But others may be homeless. Are they living in a house? Stuff of that nature to try to get at what's happening with some of the population. Just to kind of give you some ideas on how you can use this. Okay, so moving on. On the map, this is where, they advertise this as a commuter data set. However, what it really is, it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're the ones that get your monthly paycheck with your name, where you live, and then the address of where you work. And they got together with the Census Bureau and they had all this individual information. The Census Bureau was able to provide the demographics on all of us. And so they put all that together into this application. So I mentioned before, you know, there's always a difference between your daytime population and your nighttime population. Daytime population is the one that usually does a lot of shopping in the area. They go out for lunch. And, you know, if you have a community that is more full of jobs as opposed to residences, you know, then your daytime population could be huge in comparison. So this application gives you the opportunity to compare that daytime population versus the nighttime population. Now, granted, it is limited. It is only looking at workers. So it's not your full residential population, but it does give you an idea of who those people are that are moving in and out of your community or area. And it's actually very easy to use. When you first come in, you need to start with a search or you need to import something. And this is the only application that I am aware of out on the internet where you can extract all kinds of data for a customized region. Because remember, the Bureau of Labor Statistics knows exactly where you live and exactly where you work. So they can aggregate this up by blocks. So it is still, you know, the privacy is still in there. But they aggregate it up to blocks so you can get very detailed information for customized regions. So if you are working with, for example, a township and a city, you can actually have somebody with GIS actually create that boundary for you, import it in here, and then get data for that actual boundary, which is really cool. The KML, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. KML is used in Google Earth. So if you have somebody create a custom boundary for you for a certain area, ask them to also export a KML file or a KMZ file, works the same. Those can be imported into Google Earth and on the map. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone with that one. But I'm just going to show you generally how this works. So we're just going to search for Illinois. And what winds up coming up is everything in the entire country that has Illinois in the name. So if you search for, you know, something a little bit more common, not sure what that might be, maybe Springfield, there seems to be an awful lot of Springfield, you're going to get a lot of possibilities that are going to pop up. So we're just going to look at the state of Illinois. And right here, this red little icon thing here, this brings up your entire interface, and it's very small. This is all you got. This controls the entire application. The most complicated part of this entire app is getting your head wrapped around home versus work. So whatever the region is that you select, you have to remember, if you select home, it's people who live there. If you select work, it's people who work there. That may sound simple right now, but it gets more complex. So you always need to refer back to this. Are you looking at home or are you looking at where they work? Because if you think about it, when you do a survey for the Census Bureau or whatever, it's always based on what you do from your house. So if they ask you work questions, it's based upon your household address, not on your work address. So this is like one of the only applications out there that looks at what you do at work too. This second panel here on analysis type, the area profile is probably the most popular because that basically gives you age, race, sex, ethnicity, income, you know, there's all kinds of data in there. The area comparison, if you were looking at two different counties, for example, you know, or places, there's all kinds of geographies in here, as you can see, school districts, congressional districts. So you can compare two different regions, which I really don't do much of that. But distance and direction, and I'll show you what this looks like too, but that gives you an idea of how far people are going to get to their work and in what direction from the region that you're interested in. Destination, where do your resident workers go for work? and where do workers come from to go to work in your region. And then I'm going to start with inflow, outflow, which is usually pretty darn interesting. So I'll show you that one in a second. So here's all the years that Illinois has been involved in since 2002. This differs based upon the state because each state entered into this agreement at different times. Unfortunately, we still can't get national data for this application because Massachusetts hasn't signed the bottom line and got their data uploaded. They've been working on them for the last couple of years. We hear it's close, but it hasn't happened yet. Once they join the pool here, we'll have all the states. So some of the states you come in, you're going to see that they have very few years available in here because Illinois was the first adopter of this program. So we're very excited about that. Job type. So all jobs, pretty self-explanatory. Primary jobs, though, is more, I like to think of primary jobs as the body count. That's how many people are working. Whereas if you have all jobs, it's a job count because some people can hold 2 or 3 different jobs. So there is a way where you can download all jobs and primary jobs to get numbers on how many people are working second or third jobs. So there's ways that you can work this out. The way that they define primary jobs is how much money you made at the last quarter. They pick the top earner. So if you've got 3 part-time jobs, then your primary job is going to be the one you made the most money at. And then they've got private primary jobs, which excludes the government. Now, everybody that works is included in this data set, except for FBI, Homeland Security, some of those that they really don't want people to know where exactly they are living or working. Now, some of the issues that they have worked out on this application, if you work for Subway, as an example, and you get your paycheck and it's always got your information, but then it has Subway headquarters. So when they first started doing this application, you'd have, 10,000 people working at their headquarters. Well, that's not realistic. So they have changed that and updated it. So they actually get the actual location that you're working at, not the headquarter location. So this is a little bit more realistic view. You can also get at how many people are telecommuting, which is really kind of interesting. And we're only up to 2018. They just added the 2018 data, but it's going to be interesting to look at 2020 and compare that, going backwards as to how many people switched to telecommuting. But I'm going to go to the inflow outflow report first. And as you can see, the homework choice does not matter here. So I'm going to click go. Oh, it's slow. There we go. Now, so you have arrows. Now, these arrows do not indicate direction, but the 240,000 coming in means that that's how many people commute into Illinois every day for work. We got 4.5 million workers that both work and live within the state of Illinois, which makes sense. And we export about 260,000 people. So it kind of gives you an idea when you're looking at different areas, is your region more of a job center or is it more of a residential center? So this will give you an idea of that interplay. I'm going to go into the detailed report. And this is where you can tell what the difference is. So here we have a net outflow of almost the same amount of people that want. Somebody have a question? So you can see here they've got age groups, very broad age groups, I might add, but at least they're there. So, 29 or younger, find out what's going on with them. Been a lot of changes in that age group because they're having trouble finding jobs. Their unemployment is actually still in the double digits. But then 30 to 54, which is the bulk of our workers, and then 55 and older, and what's going on with those folks. The income levels are almost helpful. And I say that only because you got $12.50 per month or less, which is already below poverty level. $12.50 to $3,300 really is still pretty low. And pretty much everybody falls into the, the higher category. And then some information on industry. So they give you an idea of, these are the folks that live in your area but are working outside, because it's the outflow. How many are working inside? And then how many both work and live inside? So you're able to export that to an Excel spreadsheet. They also allow you to export the maps and everything that show up as well. So that's right here in your export geography, and you can print it as you want. And then this legend actually shows up over here on the map for you. There's additional ways to try to break down these different groups up here. I'm not going to go through any of this right now. It's better on the profile, but there's all kinds of ways to drill down into this data. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to our original page, which is clicking on this red icon down here, which is controlling everything. And we'll look at how the people who work within Illinois. We'll go ahead and grab an area profile, and I want all primary jobs. And this gets very colorful. Come on, it's got more to pop up here. There we go. Okay, so I selected the work area. So this is where people work within Illinois. I'm going to get rid of these points so we can actually see what's going on. Try to zoom in a little bit more so we can get some more detail. And so what it winds up doing is creating, now we're looking at the state of Illinois, so it's a really big geography. Oops, I need to turn that off. But if you selected a smaller geography, it would show up much better. But you can see the legend over here. Most of them are pretty small square mile areas as far as what they're coloring. So I don't see a lot of differentiation in the coloring until you get very close up. So this gives you an idea of where exactly those jobs are. And then on the converse, you can take a look as to where those people live that are working. Which I would imagine that would be interesting for the mental health community to kind of identify, okay, where are those folks in the lower income brackets, that are potentially having troubles. And then over here, you've got lots of links to drill down even further. So what kind of industries they're in. Here's worker race and ethnicity, education, gender. There's a lot of further information in there to be had. Any questions there? Okay, State Board of Education. They've recently changed their, the report card data is great to take a look at. And I would think that like IEPs and things of that nature in the schools would be of some interest. The report card data library, I always just search for report card and then pick the one for library. This is where you can download all the data for everything on all the different school districts. And fortunately, they have changed the format. It used to be the zip format that was really messy to try to work with. So in the last like 5 years or so, they've changed it to where now it's this Excel spreadsheet, which is so much easier to work with. And so you can actually download this pretty easily, and their headers actually make sense on this data. So it's pretty easy to compare from 1 year to the next on their information. So I'm not going to really get into detail on this one. I just wanted to show that to you because there is also the Illinois Interactive Report Card, which is the same data, but this organizes it by school. So instead of this massive spreadsheet of all the schools and all the districts and all the data, you can go in here and you can just look at one particular school or district and get all of their information right there. So if you're just doing a few schools, the interactive report card is probably a lot easier rather than going into downloading the entire data set. So they've got quite a few little drill downs in here too, so you can go ahead and take a look at, you know, enrollment trends and stuff of that nature on the students themselves. The academic progress has all of their testing information. Community college remediation is a new one. That's a great one to take a look at if you're interested in how many students have to take remedial coursework before they're ready for actual college coursework. And I was looking for, that's a snapshot. Here's the IEPs, the individual education plans, how many students require those. And I will say that the Illinois Interactive Report Card does not show like the Regional Office of Education information. You would have to download the actual report card spreadsheets in order to get at that information, but it is in there. So you can at least get how many students are in special ed classes and stuff of that nature in there. Okay, any questions on that? All right. I'm not going to get too detailed into this either, but the link for this particular page is in the PowerPoint slides. And I will say they just changed this website. So things are a little bit different on here than what I'm used to. But it looks like this page at least contains basically the same kind of links that they had on their previous website. So like Laos is unemployment statistics, and they allow you to drill down in here and export maps and all kinds of great stuff on what's taking place. And this was, you know, big in the news when COVID hit and all the shutdowns happened. Taking a look at this information, you know, even at a monthly basis to see what's happening. So that's been really popular. But that's where you get all that information. And then this characteristics of employed and unemployed gives you all kinds of demographic information to go along with that. Any questions there? Okay. This one is a little bit more applicable. Has anybody ever heard of Community Commons? No? Okay. This is something that you might want to check into. It used to be you could come to Community Commons and download data. However, they've changed their website because it seems like most of these data sites are trying to change from going, well, it used to be just data and then taking data into information, you know, and telling stories. That's where this website has gone. You cannot just download data anymore. At least I haven't figured out how to exactly do that. But this site is full of all kinds of resources and forums and information nationally. There is maps and data link right here. But as you can see down here, there's a click directly for mental health and all the other topics that go along defeating mental health. So they give you a bunch of keywords up here as to what kind of topics they have available in here. There are visualizations for a lot of these too, which is really great. If you're doing a report or something and you're not quite sure, you know, you want to jazz it up with something, you can come in here and you can find visualizations kind of explaining what's happening. Now, most of this is on the national scale as far as their resources are concerned, but they do have state profiles on some of these topics in here. And it seems like they get a lot of their data fed by like ICANN and stuff of that nature. So it is a website that's worth, you know, taking a look at and see if you can utilize any of that information. Maps and data is not quite as user-friendly as it was before because they're trying to tell stories. They don't want you just downloading the data and creating your own story kind of thing. They're trying to give you more information than just a bunch of numbers. So that is Community Commons. And let's see, yeah, here, the suggest a resource. Here's where you can sign in and they'll actually send you updates and stuff of that nature. But you can go in and you can suggest different resources to add into their databases so that people can start feeding additional resources and stuff in there. So everything that I have off of this website that I've used in different reports has been really valuable, because a lot of the data that they publish, they give you this little, I'll say graphic. It's like a little icon. It's like, well, it's like a speedometer. That's the best way to describe it. And the speedometer will give you where the state is located, but then it gives you this little arrow as to where your specific county is rating on whatever variable it is that you're looking at. So if you're looking at like food insecurity, you know, maybe the state is at 20%, but your region is at 50%. Gives a quick visual, you know, in order to identify what the status is for your particular area. So any questions on Community Commons? Or is this too much information? It's a lot. I know. I'm trying to cram in an awful lot in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So, okay. Before I had mentioned that the Census Bureau comes up with all kinds of really cool stuff in order to publish information too. And so this is something brand new that they just published last week. Well, last week the data became available, so they couldn't publish it before then. But they went ahead and did profiles for all of the different states. And they publish it in more of like a dashboard kind of format. So I'll show you Illinois, which is really kind of cool. They give you kind of text information instead of just giving you a data table. And then you've got all this interactivity that you can do, you know, and taking a look at different variables, and it'll change the map automatically. So if you're not familiar with the snipping tool on your computer, this is a great time to get used to that, because you can snip this and put it right into a report. Or you can grab the code and share it on your website too, because they've got the share and they've got the links here. So as long as you've got somebody that understands the website and how it's programmed, you know, you can incorporate this entire dashboard right into your website and look really cool to everybody. So here they got, you know, the counties, how much they're growing, you know, and different variables and stuff of that nature. So we get into race and ethnicity and diversity. So age, it goes on and on. There's an awful lot of information in here. Oh, and then they link directly to Quick Fix too. So anyway, there's a lot of great information in there. So if you are, you know, just doing a grant application or something like that, just need high level information, this is a great place to start along with Quick Facts, just to get those numbers quickly. Deborah, yes. Yeah, there's a lot more information here, and sometimes, you know, you get into this and either, you know, you lose it in the instructions or you lost the PowerPoint and need help. That's what the State Data Center Network is for. So it, you know, most of us are real familiar with all the census information, but usually we're working with all kinds of data sets. So yes, that is the bottom line of this whole presentation, is that we got your back. I don't know how much longer I'll be doing this work, because I'm going to be leaving NIU, but that doesn't mean that you don't have somebody to call. Just go to the State Data Center Network on the Census Bureau website, and that'll give you all the contact information. And we're all data geeks. You know, everybody that's in the network has been working with this data for quite a while, so they all should be able to help pretty quickly. Yeah, I don't expect anybody to retain everything that we went through. I just wanted to kind of give you a snippet to look at all this information so that 6 months, a year down the road, you say, you know what, I remember something about that. Then go find the PowerPoint and look up which data set it was. Okay, any other questions? We still have about a half hour here because I figured there'd be more Q&A. Ron, did you want to take some time and while you're,
It's gone.
I can bring it up on one screen if you want to go through the Department of Justice. Are you familiar with where their data is now?
Ron had to take off. He had another meeting that he had to attend, so he's not on here.
But in
Ah,
answer to your question, yes, I do a lot of work with juvenile justice and adult justice. And I think probably several others on the call do as well.
okay. Do you want to take the reins here and go through it? I'll bring it up on the screen. Was that Brooke? Did my phone drop out?
No, we're here. I think they would be interested in going over that.
I can tell you that, you know, one of the things I chair our Juvenile Justice Council, and again, you know, looking at juvenile population, the things that we look at is, again, the geographical area where crimes are being committed, ages of youth that are committed, offenses that they're committing. We're looking at, you know, everything has us doing red now: race, ethnicity, diversity. You know, looking at that, looking at the population in terms of that. So there's a lot of data that we collect just to assess, you know, the local area and what things we need to do interventions and working with juveniles. And I mean, we do the same thing with adult population as well. And I think Ron referenced Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. I know that that's been a source that I've used over the years in collecting more adult data.
So where would you find the data on this site?
That I don't know. I've not found it on that. I think when Ron was talking, he was just talking in general of data that we generally may be looking at as a mental health board, some of the different data that we collect or use for our assessments locally. And I obviously, like I said, juvenile justice is part of that population of individuals with a mental illness that find themselves involved in the criminal justice system. So that's just a population in the behavioral health field that we see a lot of.
Mm-hmm. Where do you go for that kind of information?
That is Illinois Association of, let me see, ICJA, Illinois, what's my acronym? Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, ICJIA.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure if it's under research, and under the research, there are some data sets that you can look into there.
So I just
Top,
brought
you
up,
see data sets on the top now. There says data sets. Yeah, there's some dashboards too.
I didn't see data sets. Oh, here, okay.
Mhm. And then up on the top, it says on the top, it says about apps, articles, and data sets.
It kind of looks like a portal for a lot of information from different places.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I will add this link to the PowerPoint. So anybody that doesn't have this link can access this too. Human trafficking. I know there's some human trafficking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I think the Illinois State Police site, if I'm not absolutely positive, but it seems like I've been able to get data from there too. I know there's a couple of places that you can access that criminal justice information, and the state police is one of them too. So
I was going to go ahead and take a look at this, but it's so out of date.
yeah,
It's 2018. But I was going to look at this to see exactly, here's human trafficking.
Mhm.
So at least you can get this broken down by larger cities or county, for that kind of information. I mean, domestic violence, but they don't really break that down into much detail. So it is rather limited anyway. This is the rate report. This is index crimes. That's just definitions.
Yeah, I think the domestic violence has some on their own site, but I don't think just anybody can access it. I think you have to have special permission to gather that.
This is just up. Where the heck? So I'll have to search. They use it. This just doesn't look right. Their site is kind of funky.
Mhm.
It used to be a little bit more straightforward. I don't know what's going on. But these are updates. I don't want updates. I want the data. Now I'll have to do some searching, but I'll find that link too. That's directly to the UCR, because this might give the link. Nope, that stays on there. Oh, let's take a look.
I have another question. The
Mhm.
CDC, you mentioned the CDC earlier. That's a place where we will go to look for suicide data. And I know the Wonder program, I don't know, I've had a couple of people show me that I get totally lost in that system. And I don't know if there's a specific search for that. The Wonder program, there it is. Okay, so you went right to it. So you just
Yeah,
did
very
CDC Wonder.
familiar. Yeah, it's a unique data set, that's for sure, but it's got a lot of information in it. Let's see, where's one of the topics that you might be interested in? This doesn't really have mental health on this one in particular, but I'll go into births. Pick the years that you want, which they're all a little bit different. But the first thing you have to do is just agree. And then they give you all kinds of filters. And this is where it can get frustrating because they give you so many options, but most of the options are not possible. So you're going to be getting a lot of errors, that it can't process it. But you can look at all the different variables that they have within here just for births. I mean, it's incredible. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick, where's geography? no, what region, state of residence. And we'll pick the age. Age, this is not as easy as it. I'll just, I don't really want to pick that. I'm just going to leave it at state. And then down here, you're able to break it down even further. These are basically the same filters that they have up at the top. But I found if you select them at the top, you get more errors than it's worth. We'll pick kids under 15 years having kids. I'll leave the rest of this alone. The send buttons on all these, it's the same. It doesn't matter which send button you hit. And as you can see, this gives everything for the state of Illinois. So you can break this down a lot further, but usually it takes going back and forth to try to figure out exactly how to do this. If you pick multiple years, it will just give you a total of all those years together, which usually isn't very helpful. You need to get that broken down by year. So that's where on the request form, then you can select year, which is somewhere in here. I'm not seeing year now. Well, this is interesting. They used to have all these demographics right, or variables right up top for main filter categories. Because otherwise you can't, it would aggregate all the years. So like this is looking at here. Okay, so that's just looking at 2019. But if you select all years, it'll just give you a total for all those years together, which makes no sense. And it still doesn't give you a year to break it out. Well, maybe they're doing it automatically now. Let's see what they do. No, they just added all the years together. So that's part of the problem with this Wonder data set. They used to have all of these available right up at the top. So I'm not quite sure why that filtering is not available. So that would cause certain issues for sure. There is no year. Yeah, I can understand being confused in there. It wasn't like that a few months ago because I actually just used this. Now there is, okay, we'll go into topics. A lot of health stuff, but I don't really see on mental health per se.
Yeah, they have suicide, and I don't know, I accessed it through the Wonder, but I did it with a public health person. And so they were able to navigate me from screen to screen. But I've tried to go back in there and do it myself. And it was under the behavioral health risk, suicide was. But their data never matches our local data. We're always at least 2 or 3 off on everything. So I don't know which one is the more reliable, but.
I would say your own.
Yeah,
Oops,
yeah, the coroner's next door and he keeps a pretty good tally.
Yeah. Only because some of this stuff is self-reported by the hospitals or whatever. So just depends on where the sources are. I would think they get a lot from the county, but that's who you work with directly anyway, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to track that down, try to figure that out.
It would, yeah, yeah.
Not saying a whole heck of a lot. I mean, there's risky behaviors.
I wonder if it's under deaths, under fatal accident reporting, maybe? I don't know.
Here. Yeah, this can get kind of confusing too. I'm going to underlying cause of death, the most recent. Agree. See if they give you a year here. Ah, see? They give you a little bit more here. Here's
There you
where
go.
year is. So I don't know what was wrong with the births because you need those filters in births too. But anyway, this exactly shows what I was looking for. I'm going to select Illinois again, and you have to click open. I don't know why, because it's already popped over, but let's see, we'll just leave that alone because now we're going to filter by year. So it should have all those years separate. Oh, no, I didn't select year. So it's going to aggregate it all. But let me go back. This is underlying cause of death, and I didn't select what underlying cause of death. Just here. See. This is what takes time, is trying to figure out the exact right category. I don't see anything in here for like suicide. Mental and behavior disorders. Usually if there's more than one in the category, when it pops over here, it comes up with all the other categories within that, but this isn't doing that. So open fully is not. Ah, okay. So that does make a difference when you click on open fully. Let me just pick that one. Okay. And I get an error. Because it's too small of a group.
That's right. If it's under so many, it won't even pull it up. That's why.
Yep. So I wonder, close it. I'll leave it for the whole country. Let's see what we get. So 20 people. And they have the metadata all in here. It's just a matter of trying to figure out exactly what you selected. Has something to do with mental issues for this one. And I don't even see what the category is. Yeah, it doesn't say. Oh, here. Use of alcohol or psychotic disorder. So that's basically how that works. And I know anytime I go into this particular data set, it also takes several different data runs to make sure I'm getting what it is that I really want. And as you can see, they're even missing some options that are supposed to be in there. So, but any questions on CDC? All you got to do is Google CDC Wonder and this whole thing pops up. Hey, any other questions on anything? Hey, I'll touch base with Ron, hopefully today, and see if I can get some further information on that other website. And I'll be able to add that to the PowerPoint as another resource. Does anybody have any additional resources that you think should be included so we can kind of have this as a reference manual?
The Illinois Youth Survey.
Uh-huh. Do they break data down further into like county?
I believe you can get it. Yeah, we can get it for county.
Okay. I like that data you can actually use.
Yeah. Yeah, how about that?
Looks like they got a lot of good resources too.
Yeah, it's only as good as communities complete it though, because what the problem is a lot of, they do it through schools. And depending on how many schools you can get involved in completing it, so you get sometimes you're just getting a snapshot. You're not getting as many as you would like to actually get. Some schools won't do them, and then there are those that will buy on and engage with it. And so it really depends from place to place how much data is there.
Wow. Do you know if they let the students fill this out online, or is it like a paper base?
That's a very good question. I know they complete it during in the school during the school day. Chris, are you still on there, Chris Meyer?
Sure am.
Do you know Illinois Youth Survey, if that's a paper copy or if they log on the system itself and do it on computers, or
I
the kids when they do it?
want to say it's a paper, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
Tony
a survey.
responded both paper and online.
Okay.
Well, at least they give you the questions and stuff. That's good.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. I will add that. I know there's quite a few data sites on pre-K students as far as where they're at, whether they're attending preschool and so on and so forth, which is a good prelude, to setting them up for school. But that too is a survey. Now, this is different from, not that, we just went through Burfus, but the, is it ICANN? I can't remember the name of it now. Illinois Children. I'll have to look. Remember. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap this up a few minutes early, which is always good. I will get these added into the PowerPoint, and then I will send it over to Jody. And if you have anything further to add to it, I encourage you to do that. There will be some light instructions in there on how to, access the data, as I went through pretty quick, so that you can use it into the future. So thank you very much for letting me come talk to all of you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Sherrie. Thanks so much. And it looks like Tony had said IM plus cans, or I'm not sure. In the chat box there, Sherrie, he's got it listed there. You were just asking.
Yeah, I've been there, but it's been a few years. Refresh my memory. But I'll find it and I'll add it in there, because they were asking, it seems to me you could break it down by age group. And they were asking about tobacco and alcohol use and food insecurity and all that kind of stuff as well. So that was a pretty rich data set. But that was another one where it depended on how many people actually responded. So a lot of it was suppressed. But I'll add it just in case.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for your willingness to kind of change gears and switch gears and add this additional information. I think that'll be so useful to the folks that were on the call today. And then when we archive it, anybody needs to look back at it. We'll also make sure that we have the PowerPoint, like I said, on our YouTube page, and we'll distribute it in our newsletter. So thanks again. It's been very informative. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. Got it.
Thanks to everyone for joining us too. We appreciate you all being on the call today, and hopefully you can join us again tomorrow for our business meeting. That's from 9 to 11. If you have issues with accessing the materials for tomorrow's meeting, you shoot me an email and I will be happy to send it to you directly. So thank you so much, and everybody have a great afternoon.
Take care.
Thank you.